Heidi ho, everybody. Happy Monday. I have been counting the days until I get to have this particular live stream. I am so happy to have Jodene Weber with us this evening. She is a former journalist, she is an author, and a former FBI agent. And I'm telling you, I talked to her just a little bit backstage before we went live. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation tonight, and we can discuss a lot of different topics. And I'm super excited to pick her brain about those things. She has a book out right now. When she comes on, I'm going to let her show you the cover and we'll kind of give you a synopsis of what it's about. I can tell you she was an FBI agent for 22 years. She worked out of 3 different field offices. One of those was in the Massachusetts area. Our heart goes out to her. But she also worked on the Centennial Olympic bombing, and she also was a part of the investigative crew at the Pentagon after September 11th. So she has a wide variety of past skill sets, and I can't wait to introduce her to all of you. And without further ado, I will bring you on stage here, Ms. Jodene Weber. Everybody, yay!
Hello.
Hello.
What an intro. Thank you.
Oh, you deserve it. Good grief.
Well, thank you.
You are very welcome. So tell us about your book.
Yes, my book is entitled The Bald-Faced Deception. It is psychological suspense set in the Finger Lakes of New York, and it is your typical murder mystery, whodunit. But one of the characters is influenced by my own personal journey as a 9/11 responder. I had a number of health issues a few years ago. I started to lose my hair. And so one of the characters has alopecia and is bald and wears wigs and has eyebrow appliances and all the things that you deal with when you lose your hair. And I'm getting a lot of reaction, especially from female readers who have had health issues where they've lost hair. And it's really bringing to light all the dangers of toxin exposure, whether you're at a crime scene, whether you're at a fire location, whether you're at a hurricane zone, all those things. It's very important to think about, not only if you're a first responder, but just simply a resident. So a lot of people are liking it. And it does apparently keep people guessing until the end. Most people aren't figuring out who the bad guy is yet. So
I am super excited. I'm going to be spending some beach time next month, and I will absolutely be picking this up to read while I'm on the beach. That's my thing. Either I color, I'm like a child. I either color or read. Sometimes that reading might include some rag magazines, but usually it's a book of some kind. And I love suspense thrillers. So that is fantastic. And as far as the losing hair thing, so a couple years back, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And initially, I didn't know if I was going to have to do radiation, whether I was going to be doing chemotherapy, or if I was going to be doing both. And it's a big deal, for a female.
Yes.
It's a really big deal.
And that's part of the reason I wanted this character to convey her personal story, is because I think as women, we get sick. And even if we survive these very serious diseases, we still mourn the way our bodies are no longer the same. We, in particular with our hair, we don't realize how much it's part of our identity, part of our sexuality until we may be losing it. And then we fear for the future. And so I wanted to create a character that women in particular could relate to. And I found when I was going through my health issues, so many of my friends who had breast cancer were really struggling with hair issues as well. Either they were afraid they were going to lose it, or they had to go through that cold cap treatment where you can preserve your hair. And you don't really think about how much you rely on your hair as far as your appearance and your identity and your confidence level. But when you're faced with losing it, it's a real big deal. I worried about that as much as I did being able to walk again, being able to come out of anesthesia, disfigurement, all those sorts of things. So it's
Yeah,
a big issue.
when I was diagnosed, we had a period of time that we didn't know really, what stage I was and what the prognosis was. And I can tell you that as an individual going through that particular process, I was fully prepared to lose all of my hair. I was not going to be happy about it. I was already shopping for wigs and things like that because I mean, I didn't want to, but I didn't want to do any of it. So
Right.
this was just one more thing in the list of what I didn't want to do. Um, and so, yeah, I already knew I was going in for a double mastectomy. So my body was never going to be the same again. So you have that you have to deal with. And I had no idea. I did have to do radiation afterward. And I did about 6 weeks of radiation every single day. And I was not prepared for how challenging and difficult that aspect of my healing was. And so, yeah, having to worry about your hair on top of all of that too. I'm so thankful I didn't have to worry about that, but there was a period of time that I didn't know. So
Right.
that's
Right.
fantastic.
And it is hard. It's hard. So I'm glad you're doing well, though. Your hair looks fantastic
Well,
too.
thank you. I feel fantastic. That's part of the reason I do all of this YouTube channel and everything is because I do feel like I've been given a second chance, and I don't want to let a single day go by that I'm not striving to do all the fun things that I want to do. So let's talk a little bit about Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Is everybody ready for that one? Does everybody know what Celeste Rivas Hernandez, the case is? This involves her body was found in the front trunk of a Tesla in California. It had been, her body had been in there for several weeks, is my understanding, based on the decomposition. And the vehicle is registered to a hip hop artist who goes by the name David, but it's spelled D, the number 4 VD. What I'm kind of wanting to know is initially those first steps. What does that look like if your boots on the ground and this is just the fragmented information that you have?
So, if you get the call that we have this strange smell emanating from this vehicle, law enforcement would respond. They would investigate the vehicle, most likely pop the trunk, get into the trunk, see what they have there. And then the car itself is a crime scene. The medical examiner would have to respond. There would need to be an autopsy. And then that vehicle needs to be processed for any sort of fingerprints, any sort of DNA, any sort of fibers, hairs, things of that nature. And then what you want to do is find out, well, who is this vehicle registered to? Where does it come back to? Where was this vehicle towed from? Was that vehicle ticketed in that spot? How long had that vehicle been in that location? You would do a neighborhood canvas. Ask the neighbors, do you have surveillance video? Can we look at your surveillance video? What have you observed about this car? Did you see anyone who may have been driving this vehicle? And then the vehicle itself contains potentially very, very valuable information, especially in terms of its technology. Teslas, in my understanding, have a multitude of cameras, both inside the vehicle and outside. Some are safety feature cameras, but others are designed for security purposes because Teslas are such a popular vehicle that they do somewhat tend to be maybe targeted in various types of
Vandalism.
vandalism. That's the word I was looking for. So yes, you will have cameras within the car to look at. Also, most people, when they get in a car, they have a cell phone with them. What cell phone's connected to that Bluetooth? What are the telematics in the car telling us? What is the GPS location telling us? Can we see, can we hear any sort of text messages that came across the Bluetooth, any emails, any phone calls that came through the car? All of that will be very interesting. And then, of course, law enforcement will try to take all that accumulated information and do a breadcrumb trail and work their way backwards. Figure out, all right, when was this car positioned here and eventually towed? How long had she been in that vehicle? And can we get any sort of imagery of who the driver was?
Do you think it's possible that, I mean, I feel like it should be possible for them to be able to narrow down within hours of when she likely was deceased
I
based
think
on
so.
online activity? And then also my understanding is with Teslas that even if there are people walking around it, there is a possibility of recording taking place.
Yes, because I think they have that feature so that the car can't get keyed, and that's one of the reasons. I'd be very curious if the computer system within the car would record when that front trunk was opened, if the lights click on, if they're able to see when that last occurred. I think that would be a very good time indicator as to when the body was placed in that compartment.
Do you think because they have been, at least I feel they've been very, very tight-lipped about what their investigation is showing or even what they're doing in their investigation, do you think that is because they are narrowing it down very specifically and we will, when an arrest takes place, it's going to be a very solid arrest based on electronic information?
Well, I think so. I think what I would surmise is they're waiting on toxicology from the medical examiner because remember, we don't necessarily know, even though the body was dismembered and put in this frunk or the front trunk of this vehicle, we don't necessarily know that a homicide took place. People die of natural causes. Sometimes even children have heart conditions. Sometimes people die by self-harm. Sometimes people take a pill and it's laced with fentanyl and they can die that way. So we may not be looking at a homicide. We may be looking more potentially at an abuse of a corpse situation. And potentially, if it is an overdose situation, then you want to figure out, well, where did the substance come from that killed her?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought, and in my mind, I was like, nobody puts themselves in a frunk and as a means to commit suicide. And so to me, I was like, well, then the manner of death is death at the hands of another, which is homicide. But you're right. It could be that there was some other death and then panic ensued. And so that's how she ended up where she ended up. Question from KS Granny said, didn't people smell the decomp? I mean, outside of the Tesla. That is my understanding. That's why law enforcement was called to the yard where they were keeping the impounded vehicle.
Yes, that's my understanding as well. And so I do think they will be able to get more of a pinpointed time as to when the body actually was put in the car or when the person entered the car. I also think it will be very interesting to see what they get from the search warrant that was executed at David's LA residence. My understanding is they left with computers, they left with bags of evidence. I think given the fact that we're dealing with a potential dismemberment here, they're going to use different blood reagents or different chemical substances to look, was there any sort of cleanup done within the home to clean up any sort of scene where a body may have been dismembered, say in a bathtub or something of that nature.
What sort of weight, I see this kind of being bantered about online, that the lyrics to some of his songs and to David, that is, and the music videos are, I mean, one in particular, there is a depiction of him covered in blood and he's watching two individuals put a body in a trunk of a car. Is that something that law enforcement, I know it's not evidence, but I mean, that's a little coinky dinky. Is that
Well,
something that law enforcement would eventually take into account?
absolutely. They're going to look at that. They're going to look at whether would he do this or would someone frame him to make it look like this and copy that.
That
I
makes sense.
think that's one of the things. I mean, once they're able to determine when that car was parked in that location, when the body most likely entered that frunk, they're going to look, well, where was David's geolocation? Was he away on tour at the time? Was he even in proximity and able to do this? And if not, who had access to that vehicle?
And so, do you feel confident that they would be able to get that type of information quickly? And the reason I say that is I know Celebrate data is sometimes difficult to get quickly. I know in the Alec Murdoch case, it took forever for them to get General Motors to give OnStar evidence that ultimately was used in that case. Is that something that and you may not know that Tesla is good about providing quickly in these types of situations, or is it kind of a rigmarole?
It really depends. I mean, number one, it depends if the owner of the vehicle is cooperative. If they're able to give access to the vehicle, if they're able to give cooperation as to their phone codes, things like that. We don't really know. Earlier reporting was that David was cooperating. Now LAPD is not commenting on whether he's cooperating, which says one of two things to me. Either he is cooperating and they're wiring him up to use against another subject to try to get recordings like, hey, what happened with my car while I was away on tour, and get them to talk and record that, or they're looking at him as a potential subject. Now, as for the companies that receive search warrants, there's typically a turnaround deadline time. And if they can't meet that court-ordered deadline time, typically an executive from the company will reach out, say, to local law enforcement, or if the FBI is involved, to the FBI, and say, hey, we've got an extensive amount of data. We will need more time. Can you get an extension from the court? And so there should be dialogue going on if it appears to be a very extended period of time before a turnaround on data is produced.
Yeah. So, one of the questions that's kind of been mulling around in my head is with when you were just bringing up about using David to try to get to someone else. One of the other things that has happened since this all went down is my understanding is the home that he was residing in, he's no longer residing in that home. Does that tell you anything about your case or suspects or persons of interest?
I think it could. I mean, number one, if it was chemically processed, it may not be suitable for living at this time. Given the toxins and the chemicals that they look for, there could be fingerprint dust all over the place. If they've had to cut into different walls or remove carpeting, it could be just the living conditions of the premises. Or I don't know who owns that home. I don't know if he owns it or if it's a rental property. It could be that the owner of the property no longer wants him at that property. It could be he's chosen not to go there because of media attention. There could be a lot of factors involved in that.
My understanding, and the chat can tell me if they know something different, but my understanding was the producer or his agent or someone like that was the actual owner of the home. And so that's why I was wondering if we can glean anything from that, because it seems odd to me that this
I think given
happens.
his celebrity, he may want to stay away just because of the media attention, because I think that has been a big focal point. People coming to say, well, where is this house in proximity to where the Tesla was found? And my
Mm,
understanding is that it's a walkable distance. It's not that very
really?
far away.
Yeah,
And
I know that the home is actually in the Hollywood Hills. I have been to the Hollywood Hills before. That's not someplace that a lot of traffic can handle.
right, correct. And also there's so many homes with security systems there. So it does seem like a not very well thought out crime to, first off, put a body in the Tesla, which will eventually be towed away and discovered. But number two, so close to this residential location. And number three, in an area with these nicer homes that do have security camera systems.
I always say, we just had a live stream, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago, and I said, criminal, I think we were talking about Brian Walsh, and they were like, how could he put all of these searches and everything on all of his electronic devices? This is the dumbest thing ever. I'm like, hey. Two things I see consistently happen. One is they're so smart, they think they're the smartest person in the room, and nobody is ever going to think to check anything they're doing. And the second thing is panic. And so I wonder if we're going to find out that she passed away very close in time to when he was going to be departing to tour. And that would explain kind of the haphazard fashion in which things were taken. You would want something close because you don't have a lot of time. You're pressed for time. You know what I mean?
Correct. I think, a big thing will be the timeline in this case. And what is his geolocation? Can we account for him at a hotel or a concert in another city or country, that sort of thing? Or was he in Los Angeles? That will be key to this investigation. I also think a lot will be looked at as far as, when did this relationship develop with David? Because of the age difference between the victim and him. My understanding is she's been missing since 2024. They had a relationship prior to her disappearing, is my understanding. He's got lyrics of songs mentioning her name, whether it's related to her specifically, I can't say, but certainly that name. It's not the most common name. So I do think they're going to look into that and see what was going on there. And there could be some sort of investigation into if he was doing something inappropriate with a minor. That could also be part of this.
That was going to be one of my questions. By the way, Christine, Life by the Sea, said the manager was listed as the renter of the home. So,
and I saw a statement from the manager saying that he lives with his wife and children, and that he doesn't have day-to-day interaction with David. Most of his interaction with him is online. So, but it was one of those statements from a manager where I'm giving a statement, but I'm really not going to say anything.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot of information in it.
It was a non-statement statement.
Yes.
And as far as Celeste being missing, I have read recently now that in addition to her being missing, prior to her going missing, there were a lot of calls to her family home, and law enforcement was called there. So I'm anxious to see, have you seen or read or heard anything as to what that's all about?
I've read that it was a very tumultuous home life, and that law enforcement responded 11 times within a year. On one day in particular, they were there 3 times. I think there was a lot of, as I said, tumultuous interaction between her and her mother in particular. A lot of fighting. There's local video from a nearby liquor store that shows her running away from the home on various dates. So it wasn't like her home life wasn't known to law enforcement. Now, was Child Protective Services ever contacted? Was there any sort of abuse alleged? I'd really like to know, was this just a teenager who was being disobedient to her parent and didn't want to follow rules, or was something more going on in the home?
Yeah, I'm very curious how that, and I think that's part of the reason I've kind of latched onto this case, because I have a lot of questions about it. I want to know what David's relationship with her was. How young was she when that relationship started? Was that relationship, the basis of it, because he was sort of trying to protect her and get her out of her home environment? What was the home environment? And how hard did mom and dad and family try to find Celeste if she was missing for a year? It seems like it would have been pretty easy to find her.
Yes, she was hiding in plain sight. I believe there's social media posts of her. You can do facial recognition online. I mean, if you really wanted to find her, I think you could have found her.
Yeah, that part. Those are some of the questions I have about like the domino effect. Like, what was the first domino that kind of caused all of this, and what an absolutely tragic end that she saw. Regardless of whether it was at her own hands or at the hands of another or an accident or something, it's still tragic. She's gone, and
And so young, so young.
oh my gosh, I didn't know anything. I was dumber than a frog's hair at that age. Ridiculously dumb. Gen 27 says, wasn't a female arrested in connection to this case? I have not heard that.
I have not either. That is news to me.
Yeah, unless it was literally within the past hours. I haven't seen anything. I kind of did a little bit of digging before we went live tonight, just so that I would have some latest information for us to discuss. But so we can always come back to the Celeste case. Is there anything else that you want to add as far as kind of what you think, might play out, and how long it may take? I know that the toxicology is probably going to take at least 6 weeks.
I think that's a key factor. They want to see, was there some sort of fentanyl or lethal substance, cocaine, anything, heroin, anything like that in her system. But I also think they're going to be doing key interviews, try to interview David, try to interview his entourage or his close associates, those familiar with his schedule. Who else had access to that home? Was it a crash pad? A lot of these young rappers and musicians, and I also see it somewhat in the athletic world, they come with their entourages, and sometimes they bring them from home. Okay, it's not just all new people helping with the career, it's the homies from back home. And not all of them are accustomed to the wealthy lifestyle, the money, the pools, the hot tubs, all that. And there can be some wild parties thrown, and sometimes that can really end up to be disastrous.
I just thought of another question about this particular case. It makes sense that he would stop touring, but then again, it kind of doesn't make sense to me unless you had something deeply to do with this in one way or other. I'm not making an accusation of guilt. I'm just saying, I mean, did he not talk to her for the past month while he's been touring? Like, that's odd.
That's one of the big questions. It's like, well, if this was your girlfriend or even your house guest, your friend, did you not have contact? And when you couldn't get a hold of her, why didn't you report something was wrong? That's kind of the problem here. So I'm thinking, if he's not cooperative, that may be why. Not only, I think the concert, I think that's more because of the marketing and the endorsers and all of that. There's probably such a black cloud hanging over it right now that any sort of sponsorship may be like, whoa, we don't want him going on stage right now. Let's find out answers to this before he gets back on stage. And I did see a couple brand endorsers, Crocs and Hollister, I believe, have dropped him. So there's some stink around him right now. So I think that's probably why people are keeping their distance until they really know, what are we dealing with here?
Right. So now I may come back to it because I might have another question, although I do want to just address this. Gen T 27 said on September 16th, search warrants were served at multiple locations. On that same date, 52-year-old Sandra Romo Diaz was arrested for murder. I saw this press release, but it was so vague. I will have to do digging into that because I didn't know that was something that happened. I don't know how that went past my radar.
Well, I will say I'm aware that there was another body found in another car trunk right around the same time. So I'm not sure if this arrest is connected to that case, but I have not heard of anyone arrested in connection with this case.
No, I haven't either. So I definitely will be doing some digging before my head hits the pillow tonight. So let's talk a little bit about Brian Walsh. I don't know if everybody saw today the big news that he has been transported to a facility to be evaluated for his competence to see if he can stand trial. So, guess what, everybody? The upcoming court dates that I sent out on social media yesterday that showed October 20th for Brian Walsh, you can kiss that bad boy goodbye because that's not happening.
Yes, this was a big surprise.
Super shocked by that. And I am wondering if it has to do with that incident that happened while he's been in jail.
So his attorneys say that since he was essentially stabbed while incarcerated, he has had quite a bit of, shall we say, PTSD, mental capacity breakdown. He's not able to concentrate and prepare to assist in his own defense. And so, because of that, because he's struggling so much, the court has ordered a medical evaluation. And my understanding is he will be hospitalized. He's currently hospitalized as of today, but he will be hospitalized for 20 days, and an assessment will be taken during that time to assess, is he competent to stand trial? Now, a lot of people are cynical about this. They're like, oh, isn't this convenient right on the eve of trial?
Oh,
But
Coffee Nut just put a comment. Oh, he totally is sane. Makes you wonder, though, could it possibly be a Gone Girl and that Anna was really a spy? Heard another creator mention that the other day.
So I think let's talk about Brian first. For Brian, some people think this is very performative, it's very convenient. However, from the court's perspective, you want to ensure that if there's any possibility he may not be competent, that the court follows proper procedure and ensures he is properly evaluated, because otherwise that could become an appeal issue. And you don't want that. You don't want to be the prosecutors and get all the way through the case and get a conviction and then have it potentially overturned because he's later deemed not competent to stand trial. So that's part of the big issue. So this is really kind of a hiccup. We've got a hearing scheduled October 27th where we'll get an update. What are his mental faculties and will he be able to stand trial? So that's the first thing. Now, about Anna, there's a lot of conspiracies out there that she's, part of some different organized crime group overseas. I don't have anything to verify that. All I know is she's a victim of a crime.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to back that up either. And I do have to wonder, this is the cynic in me, I do have to wonder the timing of this particular issue coming up. I know that Attorney Tipton, which is one of Brian Walsh's public defenders, was trying to get some sort of, I don't want to say he was trying to get a continuance because he wasn't before the proper court to request that. But with all of the craziness that has gone on with the discovery hearings that have happened that involve Miles King, which Rosemary Scapiccio is representing, Brian Walsh, and then there are 3 other defendants that are all impacted by the craziness of the district attorney's office in Norfolk County. It makes me wonder, and again, I don't want to make an allegation or an accusation, but it does make me wonder if there wasn't a strategic effort made to provide a little bit of delay so we can get through all of these discovery issues so we can have a clean start date to our trial.
Exactly. I think that is potentially a factor. There's been all these emails, all these phone calls on personal phones by members of the district attorney's office, the Massachusetts State Police. Different individuals have done things in different cases. Collectively, it's created a problem, specifically in the Karen Reed criminal trials, also for Aiden Carney and lack of discovery. Miles King, his discoveries years behind. We saw Adam Lally testify And he never really gave any explanation why he didn't hold up to his obligation to turn over the discovery. He would just say, well, yes, they told me I would get it, and then they didn't give it to me. Well, then what did you do? I would
Right.
schedule a meeting. And what did they say? We'll get it to you. Well, did you? I mean, we just kept going on and on, and
And
it's frustrating.
it didn't really come to any sort of conclusion. And that's been the reason I continue to follow that little offshoot from all of the other cases that I'm following, because it's fascinating to me that someone from the district attorney's office would have to get on the stand and testify about discovery violations. Like, are you not mortified as a human being to have to get up there and do that about your poor work performance? It's like shades of Ellen Greenberg's case all over again. Just the utter.
Yes. And well, it's either incompetence or it's willful blindness. They don't care. They've never had their feet held to the fire. And I think, too, when you have that, because this is really piggybacking on what we saw at the end of the Karen Reed trial, where Hank Brennan stood up and tried to insinuate that those holes in John O'Keefe's shirt were caused by road rash. And all along, Adam Lally and Laura McLaughlin sat there knowing that those holes in that shirt were created by a lab worker, a forensic lab worker. I mean, that to mislead the jury deliberately like that. And then now, just a month later, after we had that acquittal in Karen Reed, now we have Adam Lally getting up on the stand in July testifying as to why the discovery wasn't turned over, why it's so many years late. And he's just like, ho hum. It's infuriating. And if I was a taxpayer there, I would be incensed.
Oh my gosh, I would be beyond livid. I would be sitting on the courthouse steps or sitting on the city hall's steps, wherever I needed to be noisy until somebody did something to fix this, because it's insane. The system up there, I would be terrified to live there. And I made some reference on X last week that, I'm glad I don't live in Massachusetts, because I call it Massachusetts. And somebody commented back and they're like, we're glad you don't either. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. Thanks for agreeing with me. But because I'm scared for the people that live there, because it is so either corrupt or incompetent. In either way, it's awful.
It is. It's awful. And let's not forget about Sandra Birchmore either. That's another big, and they're all in this same county. They're all right there. And that, to me, and that's what we know about. What don't we know about?
What if we didn't know everything that was going on with Karen Reed? I don't think Brian Walsh would have gotten the attention. Miles King would have gotten the attention. Aidan Carney,
Sandra Birchmore.
Like, it's a big.
Kelsey Fitzsimmons.
Kelsey Fitzsimmons. Yeah, because we wouldn't have been following. We wouldn't have been paying attention. All of a sudden, this case nobody knew anything about or cared about shows up in front of a wackadoodle judge who is just bitterly awful to a defendant. And we got to witness that. What are we doing up there? And yes, she's in Essex County, though, but it's still all in the same general area. You're only talking like one county over, if I'm thinking correctly.
Correct. And I think with Karen Reed, especially for those of us who watched both trials and saw the different problems that emerged in both trials. I mean, in that first trial, when that inverted Sally Port video came in at trial, and it was revealed that had never been turned over to the defense before. That was just, where does that happen? And then we have videos missing, crucial videos at crucial times, missing from 3 different systems. That's why the FBI was investigating. That just doesn't happen.
Is that what your belief is?
Yes, I think so. Because I worked on an evidence response team with the FBI, as well as being a special agent, had my own cases. And when you're talking about putting together a case, Prosecutors want as much evidence as possible. And what is more critical than video footage of the vehicle? And can we see that broken taillight? And what time can we see that broken taillight at? So the fact that there was no neighborhood canvas collecting video from nearby neighbors all along the route, whatever route she took to go back to John O'Keefe's, there should have been canvases all the way.
And you know there are cameras that have
Absolutely.
evidence.
She passed multiple homes with cameras and businesses, etc. But to have not only the ring camera from his home disappear exactly when she would have been pulling in the driveway, to have the library video disappear when her vehicle would have been going by the library, and to have the Sallyport video disappear right after her vehicle arrives at the Sallyport, no way. No way. And
Well,
look at Michael Proctor. Look at all the things he didn't do, but look at what he did do. He made sure within those first days of February, he got over to Canton PD to get that Sallyport video. He had it all along.
yeah, and that right there is the only reason I am going to continue following her civil cases, because I think there was a lot, not only was there a lot of evidence that we didn't see because it was manipulated, I also think there was a lot of evidence that Judge Cannoni did not let in, that we have never, as the general public, seen before. And in a civil case, it's going to be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's going to have to answer the questions, and the Jen McCabe's of the world are going to have to make sure they keep all of their stories straight. And
well, yeah, she hasn't done that so well the past couple trials. She's had a lot of.
She's going to have to do it again. Like when you don't tell the truth, then you have to try to remember your story. And so now she's got to remember, well, which story did I tell when, and which one am I going to say this time? Like, I think it's a big problem for them. If I were the O'Keefes, I would not be feeling very comfortable moving forward with the civil suit.
Well, I think, it really depends what their motivation is. Is it just they want a financial payout, or do they want to basically sock it to Karen? Is it because they don't like Karen? Do they really believe she hit John O'Keefe with her vehicle, especially after being acquitted, especially after all those doctors on both the Commonwealth and the defense side, as well as the biomechanical engineers, all said he was not hit by a car. He did not have injuries that were consistent with that, nor did the vehicle have damage consistent with hitting a 19-pound man.
Don't you just wonder? I have run this kind of through my head many, many times. Someone had asked me a few weeks back, if you were the O'Keefes and your son had been killed, you would be angry and doing this too. And I was like, no, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't think that Karen killed him with her vehicle, because the evidence has clearly shown that's not what happened. And I personally, at this point, I don't think it's about any sort of rational, reasonable deductions being completed on the O'Keefes. I think it is just sheer hatred. Like, you can feel the hatred they have for Karen Read and for Aiden Carney.
Yes. And, I feel like the only one that I think may be receptive to any sort of, can we talk about your family's relationship with the Alberts and the McCabe's, is Paul's wife, Erin. Although I'm not sure they're still together. I've heard they may be separated.
It was iffy there at the end of season 2, Karen Read. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, because here's what I would say as a former law enforcement officer. Pretty much every law enforcement officer that brings a case to court, a criminal case, typically phone records play into it. And when you have calls and text messages that are provided as part of the phone records, that's probative evidence. The fact that we have all these phone records showing phone calls from Jen McCabe to the Albert residence at 5:07, at 6:07, 6:08, at 2:22 between Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. And they're all claiming, no, nobody picked up. No, that was a butt dial. Nobody sensical would believe that. No one.
So I'm curious, and I apologize. We didn't even have this on the radar to talk about Karen Reed. It's just sort of happening. So here we are. Have you ever, in any case that you have worked, have you seen digital evidence from a Celebrite report that showed activity at a specific time, but it really wasn't at that specific time? It was actually at another time. And I'm referring to How's Long to Die in Cold.
I have not personally had that. But I will say, I don't know why, and I have a feeling the FBI did this, rather than get wrapped around the axle with the Celebrite reports, just do a search warrant to Google and find out who Googled How's Long to Die in the Cold, and they'll tell you, oh, we had one person Google that, and here's when it happened. Done.
Yeah, I think that was completely mismanaged by the prosecution, and I think it was mismanaged on purpose.
Yes. Yes.
I think we were led down a primrose path that had absolutely nothing to do with the reality.
Well, and when you look at the prosecution cases, both in trial 1 and trial 2, the Commonwealth witnesses, they had witnesses who contradicted each other. Ian Whiffen and Jessica Hyde contradicted each other. And their entire timeline of the case flipped from the first trial to the second trial. And then when it didn't work, wasn't working the second trial, then they adjusted again and came in with Aperture and their new revised timeline. So the Commonwealth didn't even know what their case was or what their theory of the case was.
So I've tried to explain to my family, because of course they don't have anything to do with any of this. That's why I have a YouTube channel, so that I don't drive my family crazy with all of my trials and everything that I want to talk about. But trying to explain to them the crazy things that came in as evidence in Karen Reed season 1, and I'm referring to missing Sally Port video, inverted Sally Port video, missing library and other video, red Solo cups, Stop and Shop bags, unprotected murder weapon for a period of time, shady things. That was season 1. And then I go to season 2 and I'm like, let me tell you about this company called Aperture. They had Blue Man Group come in and do this little, I don't even know what you call that. It wasn't a demonstration. It was a farce.
Well, for $600,000.
Don't even get me going. I want to know how to make that kind of money.
And then the guy from Aperture lied about having his college degree and his education. You can't make that up.
I know.
You cannot make that up.
It was just like the gift that kept on giving. I was like, this is absolute insanity. It doesn't seem real. The things that happened in that case does not seem real.
And I do think trial 2, there were two great new additions for the defense that really, I think, helped solidify an acquittal. One was Robert Alessi joining the team. I think he was just, if you like law and you like to understand, he's like a professor. And yes, it takes him a while. He's a bit loquacious, but if you see the strategy and how he builds and how he weaves, it is masterful. It is truly masterful. And I think he is a big reason they got an acquittal. And number 2, Dr. La Posada. She was fantastic. Fantastic.
He put old Hanky Spanky right into place. I was like, you go, girl.
Yes. So, I mean, you just can't, if you wrote that in a book or in a movie, nobody would believe it. And
Nobody
that's,
would believe it.
and that's the thing. This is real life. This is really happening to the people in this community. And it's not just this case that's so drastic and a mess. We've got almost a half a dozen cases. I mean, Sandra Birchmore, that's just devastating what was going on there and what was covered up.
Well, thank God the feds did step in, because I'm not sure anything ever would have been done had they not
Well, they
stepped
still won't charge it on the state level. They're
in. That's
still
true.
not charging it.
Yeah. Seeing that case, and I think it was Dateline that had the episode. What was it? Not this past Friday, but the Friday before. And I definitely watched it just to kind of get a synopsis of everything. And when you see it laid out the way that it was laid out, in that, you're just like, how did they screw this up so bad?
Well, and I read the internal affairs investigation that was conducted by John Fanning. He had those emails. He had all that layout of, he's checking out my closet, he's checking out my bathroom, he's acting really weird. They had all that. They knew she was threatening him that if you're not involved in my baby's life, I may tell what you did to me when I was a teenager. They had all of that and still didn't investigate her death as a potential homicide.
Well, it's the same players. We're right back to
Right.
Fanning, Tully, Guarino, Proctor, Buchanan. Am I missing anybody?
Yeah.
It's like the Fab Five.
Yeah, same group. Mm-hmm.
So it's always the same people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how. Maybe the feds can finally fix it. I mean,
well, here's what I'm curious about. Matthew Farwell has, once again, he was supposed to have a hearing last week and it got canceled. He has had multiple hearings canceled. And I think, based on my experience, he's cooperating. And I think he's got a lot of information. I think he can tell about other victims, because usually when there's predation going on, it's not just one juvenile. I don't think Sandra Birchmore was potentially the only victim. So I think he can say, well, there were other children and here's who they were. He can talk about other police officers. He can talk about who in the Massachusetts State Police was brought in to help cover up the murder of Sandra Birchmore. He can talk about the Norfolk District Attorney's Office and was any sort of pressure put on the medical examiner. All those things, if he has knowledge of, he can start talking, and the federal government will listen. They will listen.
Well, yeah, especially if you're the first one too.
Yes.
I know that.
Yeah, so, first one to the table gets the best deal.
Absolutely. So here's a question that keeps coming up, and that the federal investigation with reference to Karen Reed's case is closed. Do the feds really come out and tell everybody they've stopped investigating?
I have never done that in my entire career. I was never even allowed to verify I had an investigation because I never knew who I was talking to. Someone could call up and say, "Hi, I'm Janet," but I don't know if it's really Janet. It could be a subject of a case. It could be an attorney. It could be the media. So I would always direct all phone calls and inquiries to the United States Attorney's Office. So, and here's the thing people don't know. The FBI can close a case at 9 a.m. and new evidence can come in at noon. And by 5 o'clock, that case is back open again. So, and I do think, based on things that I saw in the pretrial hearings of trial number 2 and Karen Reed specifically, where they had information about Helena Rafferty having knowledge about the videos and not turning it over and being selective about what she turned over. I'm like, well, there's your PC for another reopening a case. If you didn't have it reopened or you just shut it down, you've got probable cause now to reopen that investigation.
Well, and then she retired very quickly.
Yes, which doesn't mean she can't be prosecuted. It just means she got out of Dodge before people could start asking questions.
Well, she wanted her pension.
Yeah, and wants to exactly preserve the pension. So I do think at any given time, a case can be reopened. It can stay open for a very long time, as long as there's active investigation going on. What you really need is a prosecutor willing to prosecute it. And so there's a lot going on in the Department of Justice right now. Every time there's an administration change, different administrations have different priorities. You know, the orders come down from the top. We're going to prioritize ICE cases and international cartels or whatever their priorities are. And if local level public corruption isn't a high priority, the United States Attorney's Office may not work that case, you know, and it can vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction,
Sure.
depending on the United States Attorney who has the ultimate call on what cases they're going to go after.
So I'm going to move on from the Karen Read because I really am curious about the Centennial Olympic bombing. Tell me kind of, we talked backstage before we started. I don't know if, why don't you give a synopsis of kind of what happened? There was, I feel like, some misdirection that was done during the investigation. So I just want you to give kind of like a summary about it for everybody. Because that was
Sure.
quite a while ago, if I remember correctly.
Right. It was in 1996 during the Olympics in Atlanta, and in downtown Atlanta, right in front of CNN Center, and there's a big aquarium there now. There wasn't one at the time, but there's a large park in front of CNN Center, and that's Centennial Olympic Park. And during the Olympics, they had multiple booths set up with different vendors. You could go eat there. You could go listen to bands. They had a big Jumbotron stage with all the Olympic events on. And it was a great place for people to come and gather and kind of celebrate the Olympics if you didn't have tickets to events or wanted to trade pins, all that sort of thing. Well, on the night, just overnight into July 27th, shortly after midnight, a bomb was placed under a park bench near the NBC Sound Tower. Now, that NBC Sound Tower had a security guard by the name of Richard Jewell. And Richard Jewell, doing his patrols around the tower, saw this group of kids that we call the Speedos because they worked over at the Speedo Shack during the Olympics. The Speedos were there looking at this backpack. And they had some adult beverages, shall we say, and they were turning this backpack, and they were thinking about taking this backpack into the House of Blues down the street. And so Richard Jewell approached them and said, "What are you doing?" And basically it became kind of this is my town and you're creating problems in it. And so they kind of, exchanged some words. But Richard noticed this backpack under the park bench, and he immediately notified other law enforcement, and people began to be backed away. And what they didn't know was there was actually a device, a pipe bomb in that backpack, and it was set on a timer for it to go off. Now, meanwhile, while all this is going on and Richard Jewell's talking to the Speedos, a 911 call comes in to the 911 center and says there's a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes. And what that was designed to do was have law enforcement descend on the park, and then when the bomb detonated, you would kill a lot of law enforcement. Well, ultimately, as the bomb tax and law enforcement was backing people away, the bomb exploded. It was loaded with shrapnel, which are different nails and screws, things like that. And there was a woman, Alice Hawthorne, who was killed as a result of getting hit by shrapnel. And then there was another man who died of a heart attack fleeing the bombing. And then there were just dozens and dozens of people who sustained injuries from the different nails and screws and everything that flew through the air. So ultimately, Richard Jewell was interviewed because he's a material witness. He found the bomb. And there was a lot of pressure from headquarters and politically to get this solved. We've got people from all over the world here, and we need to know who did this. We've got a bomber out there. Hurry up. Well, one of the things in looking at Richard Jewell's background, the FBI received a call from one of his former employers who said, not for nothing, but we had some problems with this guy. And he did have some problematic history where he would seem to exaggerate and maybe take credit for things he didn't do. So that would send up a red flag, and that would warrant more investigation. Additionally, he's a key material witness. He found the bomb. We need to know, well, who did you see around this tower? Where were you at, 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before, etc. But ultimately, what happened is, due to a number of factors, Richard Jewell was essentially in the media deemed a suspect.
Yes.
And ultimately, Richard Jewell was a hero. He backed people away. He did the right thing. He got law enforcement to respond, but it was a huge disaster. And there was a big, big problem because a lot of the older agents felt, no, it's him. We got our guy. And a lot of the younger agents were like, no way. There's no way he could have made that 911 call that came in from the phone on the other side of the park. So you have a lot of power dynamics there also at play. Ultimately, Richard Jewell is, to this day, he essentially is a hero, and was ultimately sued and became a very wealthy man before he passed away. But where do you go to get your reputation back? You can't.
Right.
So it was a very tragic thing. Now, I didn't get to that case until 1997. Richard Jewell had essentially been cleared, and I got there like 3 weeks later. But that was one of my first questions, like, all right, what happened with Richard Jewell here? Because this is a cluster. This is not good.
Well,
and so once they moved off Richard Jewell, it's like, well, who do we have as a suspect? And really, they didn't have any suspects. And the bomber did multiple other bombings in Atlanta. He attacked a reproductive health clinic, and he planted 2 bombs there, one to go off initially, and then a second one in an area where law enforcement would congregate. And then he did 2 bombs at LBGTQ nightclub, and same type of situation. One would go off, law enforcement would gather, and then the second device was meant to harm responders.
sure.
So we had those 3 in Atlanta, and then we had a period of time where nothing happened. And then in, I believe it was end of January 1998, a bomb goes off at a reproductive health clinic in Birmingham, Alabama. And a police officer was killed, and a nurse at this clinic was very, very gravely injured, but she did survive. And that is where a witness saw a man walking away from the clinic, taking a wig off, changing his clothes. He hops in a blue truck with North Carolina plates, and that's how we were able to get the name Eric Robert Rudolph, who ultimately became our suspect, ultimately was apprehended years later after this massive manhunt up in North Carolina in the mountains. And he's currently in Supermax and pled out to all the bombings.
I remember, in 96, I was in my mid 20s. Oh, I was such a young spring chicken back then. And I don't ever remember it coming out in any forceful fashion until many, many years later that Richard Jewell actually was a hero and not a suspect. The splash that it made in naming him as a person of interest or a suspect, however you want to put it, everybody knows when they say person of interest, those like, okay. I don't feel like the media did a very good job in clearing his name.
Well, no, and I don't think the media did a good job in asking the right questions either at that time. I mean, he was the security guard for that NBC sound tower. Of course, the FBI is going to need to talk to him. I mean, especially because I was an investigative journalist beforehand. I'm like, well, didn't anyone ask, all right, well, are you looking at him in a suspect capacity or as a material witness because he has vital information to provide the FBI? Did you honestly receive this problematic history from him at the university? Is that true? The reporters didn't go out and look at that. And so I do think, there were things that warranted investigation. If it just doesn't matter what case you're on, if you get a call from the ex-employer who said, look, I had to get rid of this guy. They were problematic. Here's the behavior. And it's the type of behavior where you're trying to get attention or be the hero. And then he's the one that finds the bomb. Of course, you're going to talk to him some more. You would be derelict of duty not to look at him and not to question him and not to ask for a polygraph. But the techniques that were utilized, and they tried to do a training video with him, that should not have happened. That was all very poorly done.
So I have a couple of questions. One of them is, if you were getting ready to interview an individual, I assume your approach is different, whether you're looking at them as a material witness or you're looking at them as a potential suspect. But ages ago, I used to do collections, and I used to tease all the time that when I picked up the phone to make a collection call, no one in my office would know whether I was making a collection call or a solicitation call because they sounded exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if that is the same approach, regardless of whether you have a material witness or whether you have a suspect in your questioning.
Well, you want them to talk, and a lot of them won't talk, or they want their attorneys with them, and their attorneys will shut down things. But I always believe if you can get dialogue going, the more information you can get, the more they're willing to volunteer, the more you can come back with and challenge later. It doesn't even necessarily have to be that same day. You want to have some sort of rapport building with your interview subject. And to me, it's always better to let them educate you. Tell me, what do you know? And if they feel comfortable, they will tell you. And if they have nothing to hide, they'll tell you. And then you've got everything and you can go back. And to me, I've had a lot of interview subjects where we'll do these long, hour-long interviews, and then they'll say, I'm trying to remember, I don't want to not tell you something and have you think I'm lying. And I would say to people, I'm like, well, we've talked about a lot here, and you're going to go home tonight and you're going to be thinking, what did I forget? And, oh, I thought of something. I said, I would rather you pick up the phone and call me and tell me tomorrow, because it's different to be, I forgot something and now I'm providing it, than being deceptive and lying about it. There's a difference there. So I always told people, I said, look, most people aren't interviewed by the FBI in their lifetimes. It can be very unsettling. You're probably a little nervous. You're probably trying to be, very forthcoming, but you could simply remember something you forgot to mention. We all do that. So just don't think that we're not receptive to hearing, or there may be new information I glean from another source where I need to come back and interview you. It doesn't necessarily mean you're in trouble. Now, the problem becomes when an interview subject tells you things that don't match up with either your physical evidence or electronic evidence or any sort of other information you receive via other interviews, other law enforcement, that sort of thing. Then you do need to go back. And typically what I would do is I would always start out an interview with the 1001 statute printed out on a piece of paper, which is, it basically says it's a crime to lie to me because I'm talking to you in my official capacity. And so if I got to a point in the interview where I knew they were lying to me, because most FBI agents know the answers to questions before they ask them. If I knew I was being lied to, I would just slide that piece of paper towards the interview subject. And then I just look very calmly, say, I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk to your attorney. And then I'd walk out of the room with the prosecutor, and then we'd come back in and boom, they suddenly would change their story, or, oh, I remember now.
I had an epiphany.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting. This past weekend with the Mark Sanchez incident in Indianapolis, and they so quickly came right back out and said that they were going to arrest him. And I thought, oh, how can that possibly be? He's been like in surgery and everything else. How can you possibly come to that conclusion? And then when I was reading the special call or the affidavits, and they were saying that the witness, that the driver of the delivery box truck, his account of what happened very closely matched all of the video evidence that they had already viewed at the different locations. And I was like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense why it was so quick.
Yes. My understanding is the hotel had video, and then my understanding is the truck driver had pepper spray and
Yes.
first tried to deter him with pepper spray, which to me gives him so much credibility
Yes.
because he took a less dangerous um,
Avenue.
weapon and tried to defend himself. And then when that didn't work and he kept coming at him, Sanchez kept coming at the driver, he's like, well, he's crazy. He's going to kill me. Then I can see why he went for his knife.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
legitimately feared for his safety. And my understanding right before we came on here, I saw that he has sued Mark Sanchez because he's disfigured. And he has sued Fox, I believe Fox Corporation, who employs Mark as a commentator.
Well, yesterday they were just misdemeanors. Today there's a felony that dropped.
And
So
there could be more charges. He could be looking at attempted murder.
I am thinking they're not done. And that's why it's one of the cases I'm following, because I think it's fascinating.
Well, and it sounds like his level of intoxication. Now, obviously, this is all alleged, but I mean, it sounds like the intoxication level was just off the charts, too.
Yes, it sounds like when I read the affidavit and he showed up kind of lurking around the back end of this box truck, and it seems like it's unusual and bizarre behavior for a sober individual to be doing. And it just kind of reading it was like, well, he went around the back and then he came around the front and then he went around the back over here and then he went down the alley this way or the street this way and then went back the opposite way on the street. Now it's like, what? And Jay Cornish brings up a really super good point, CTE and booze.
Well, that's the thing, and we can't test for CTE, but he was a quarterback. Think about how many times. I would be curious to know how many concussions and severe injuries did he have to the head during the course of his NFL career.
Yeah, I think that something needs to be done. I'm a big fan of the Guardian halos that they wear when they have suffered a concussion. I personally don't understand why we don't just have all of the players wear those. It doesn't make sense to me. And Jay Cornish says he was hit a lot. Yes, I don't know if you all remember my earlier videos, but I had a Mark Sanchez New York Jets jersey behind me. And it is because my husband is a massive New York Jets fan, and the New York Jets never have an offensive line. So the quarterbacks get sacked and creamed constantly on that team.
Mark Sanchez, Aaron Rodgers, you bet. They all do. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that is going to be an interesting case to kind of unfold as well. I have one last question that I wanted to ask. I know you were an investigative journalist and then became an FBI agent. Tell me how I shouldn't say the transition, like what was your training like and how did you come into the program to be an FBI agent? I'm curious about that part of your story.
So I was a broadcast journalism major in college, and during my junior to senior year, that summer in between, I was interning at a radio station, and that was the summer Silence of the Lambs came out. And so I saw the movie and I'm like, well, this looks fantastic. How do you get to do this? So as part of my radio station internship, I did a feature story with an FBI agent on how women apply to become FBI agents. And so here I am in college, and this really nice FBI agent said, all right, Jody, you go do your little TV thing for a few years after you graduate, but we could use you. You interview people well, you write well, you're going to learn to develop informants as a reporter. Those are all skills that we could use. And so that kind of stuck in my head. And so I did. I went and worked for an NBC affiliate for several years. And after 3, I filled out the application, and it took 2 years to get into the FBI with all the background tests and everything. And then I was accepted into Quantico in August of 1997 and graduated as a special agent in November.
So what are the qualifications to, I'm assuming a college education?
Yes.
How does that work? I'm fascinated because I've never had the opportunity to speak with an FBI agent or former FBI agent.
So I was one of the rare ones. I had a diversified background, but when I came in, it was a lot of either law enforcement or former military, attorneys, pilots, accountants, things of that nature. And I was one of the few, some social workers or those in the therapy field, some in the medical field, some in the engineering field. But now, if you're coming in now they want computer skills. Now they want anything computers, anything engineering, anything medical, anything foreign language skills, especially Arabic, Chinese, Russian, all those things.
I was like, I understand your story, but I need to know, like, how did it go from this to this? Because that is super cool to me. So I'm so thankful that you agreed to come on my channel tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I will happily invite you back again. We'll have plenty of other cases to talk about, and I'm sure things are going to be unfolding in the cases we've already talked about tonight. So I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you taking the time on this miserable Monday. It actually was a good Monday. It's the start of the week, we still got all these days to work ahead of us. So thank you so much again. I'm going to do a little wrap up with everybody, and we will be talking soon. Thank you so much, Jody.
Thanks, Janet.
Wow, guys. Isn't that fantastic? I could talk to her for hours and hours and hours and hours, but I'm getting hungry. I haven't had dinner yet. So, next thing on the docket, Wednesday evening, we'll be doing Wine and Crime Wednesday again. And my plan is to do a little deep dive into Laken Snelling. Laken Snelling is the young lady who was a University of Kentucky cheerleader who hid her pregnancy and then delivered the baby in her apartment, and her roommates ended up calling law enforcement when they found the deceased baby. So that is my plan for that evening. We may touch base on some other things. There is a Kelsey is it tomorrow? I'm trying to remember what my Kelsey Fitzsimmons hearing, is that tomorrow? Let's look here. Hang on. I don't remember what I posted. Do y'all remember what I posted? Jay Cornish is saying yes, Kelsey Fitzsimmons. So we'll probably have something to discuss about Kelsey on Wednesday for Wine and Crime Wednesday also. So we'll have a little wrap up. In case anything else pops off in the meantime, as far as what might go on with Mark Sanchez, and if there are additional charges between now and then, we'll chat about that a little bit too. And let me see what's on my list here. I think that's about where we are. I am still going to be reaching out to Music City 911. They have a YouTube channel. I ran into them while I was at CrimeCon. That may be Monday's show next week, where we talk with Music City 911, and they tell us all about the 911 calls that they have and review on their channel. What time on Wednesday? It is always 6 p.m. Central Time. Always 6 p.m. on Mondays and on Wednesdays. And typically, if I'm going to do something any other night of the week, it will be at 6 o'clock Central Time as well. So with that, I am going to bid you adieu. I hope you all have a fantastic week. And remember, it doesn't cost a penny to be kind, so find someone to do something nice for if you haven't already. And remember to make good choices. Bye-bye, guys.